Healthcare is changing fast, and the leaders steering the change have stories worth hearing. I'm Pamela Baer, the founder of Healthcare Executive Search. We are a Stanford Rose Associated member with a background in senior living, med tech, mental health, and 16 years of executive recruitment. I've talked to a lot of leaders through the years. We want to have a conversation about healthcare, the shifting and changes in healthcare. And I'm so excited to be with you today. And I want to thank you for your attention. And our goal is to educate and inspire folks to grow in their career, get some tips on hiring and retention, and learn from our subject matter experts. Today, our guest today is Montez Fitzpatrick, a Chief Information Security Officer expert. He is an absolute expert who started in engineering, which paved the path and the foundation for his great career. That technical foundation. He's done amazing things. He has a different perspective. He has a perspective of healthcare, but he also has a perspective of other industries, which is truly insightful that he brings to healthcare and to other disciplines. He's built a security program from the ground up, reduced critical incidents by 70%, helped guided the organization through significant growth to a valuation, nearly $750 million in his last role. Before healthcare, he was at Equifax, working with the billion-dollar security portfolio during one of the most scrutinized periods in history. He is a rare executive who is comfortable in the boardroom and is comfortable walking into a lunchroom. He's confident, poised, sense of humor, and very approachable. And I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. Montez, what does it feel like to be actually inside a major cybersecurity incident? Attacks evolve into things like triple extortion, stealing data, locking systems, and directly threatening patients. How should healthcare leaders think about decision to pay or not to pay a ransom?
Great question, Pamela. First off, before we get into the question, thank you so much for having me. And I love that I get to be on the inaugural relaunch. And that introduction was fantastic. Now I have to have you with me wherever I go so you can introduce me because I think you do it much better than I can do myself.
Thank you.
Okay. So, being inside a major cyber incident is extremely challenging for all the ways that you would think. And there, of course, is the quoted, will you be the hero, you sort of rise to the occasion, or do you regress to your base training? And sort of the answer is both. I know that's we're kind of starting off with a non-answer, but let me explain. When it first starts off, it's almost unbelievable, really. And so all you have is going through the training. You go through the things that you know that you should do as part of your playbooks and your run books. Uh, because really you can only just barely believe like what is happening. Like in your mind, you're sort of not really like coming to grips with it. A really good friend of mine, Zach Lewis, who went through a cyber incident, and his organization allowed him to put out a book called Locked Up, and it's very good. It really goes from that initial part all the way through all the steps of a cyber incident, and it's very good, very done very well. And cyber incidents themselves are a marathon. There are plenty of heroics to go around for everyone, and I think that you'll find that everyone on the team will go through and do something heroic, throughout the time because it's a long process. As far as paying the ransom goes, the of course, my official advice is to never pay the ransom, okay, officially. But
Mhm.
really, when you when you think about paying the ransom, you have to understand, well, like, what is the ransom? Like, what are you actually getting? So,
Mhm.
like, paying the ransom is more or less like it's like a pinky swear
Mm.
to the bad actors that they're gonna leave you alone. You
Mhm.
It's a receipt, not a solution, right? And so, you know, the depending on the circumstances of where the payment may be going, your hands may actually be tied. The federal government may prevent you from paying if it's going to, and something that would be under embargo or for foreign asset control restrictions.
Mhm.
The time that you need to think about that, though, if you're going to pay the ransom or not, is I guess maybe can you call it like your ransom philosophy? Is that like a thing? Maybe okay.
Okay.
So call you like your ransom philosophy. Before the 2 a.m. Wake up call that something is happening, you need to work with your board, inside and outside counsel, um, cyber insurance, and then federal law enforcement. I know here in St. Louis, where I am, the federal law enforcement, the FBI, CISA, they are often really reaching out to organizations to bring them in, especially for like tabletops to help go through that. Now, when you're going through an investigation or a ransom there, they won't investigate for you, right? But
Mhm.
they will help you where they can, and there's a lot more to this, and of course, maybe there's that old adage, the ounce of prevention, and we all know the rest of it there. But yeah, I think that's kinda the long-winded,
Mm.
answer to your question.
But, we all think of that whether we're a leader in healthcare or not.
Mhm.
We're just in an era where you just have to be so careful, period. And then
Yeah.
this is a severe extreme for organizations, for healthcare organizations. So,
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I mean, that's
mhm,
you be careful, and I don't know how many of the listeners there are fans of Star Trek, but, Captain Picard, right, of the Next Generation says that,
right. Mhm.
I think there was a quote there, and that was, something like, "You can do everything right and still lose, that's just life." So,
Mhm, mhm, that's true, isn't it?
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's true. Wow, what an insightful response. Thank you for that. Again, you've operated in different industries,
Mhm,
Equifax and in healthcare, two highly, highly regulated industries, high stakes.
mhm.
Where do you see the biggest difference in how leaders approach risk?
Ooh. Between Equifax, so financial services and healthcare. Now,
Mhm.
the preface is all in this is anecdotal, right? So
Right.
this is Montez's experience.
That's right.
You know that I think financial services, they really operate risk on as a mathematical equation.
Mhm.
And so in healthcare conducts it as a operational liability for like potential operational liability for fragile workflows. I
Mhm.
think that's sort of the packaged answer, I think. But, on one hand, you have like, your life and my life at stake. On the other hand, you have like a comes to risk is consistently more mature than the other. And we I think we all know what industry that it should be,
Mhm.
and then we all know what industry that it is. And so, maybe the answer there is an exercise best left to the listener. But if you think that healthcare is more mature than financial services when it comes to risk, you would probably be wrong.
Mhm.
That's just the reality of it. And maybe your follow up question would be, "Well, Montez, why do you think that is?" And
Yeah.
I wish I knew. I wish I knew. I say, I
Mhm.
think part of it is, and there's no blame. I think it just is where it is because of maturity. But
Mhm.
when we think about, at least in my experience,
Mhm.
like the healthcare practitioners that have sway in the organization, they tend to like administrators who
Mhm.
once were themselves health practitioners. I think
Yeah,
I think you can kind of get along with me on that, right?
absolutely. There's
And
more. more practitioners leading
Mhm.
institutions all the time.
And that has a whole host of innumerable benefits that actually matter for, like, day-to-day operations, 1,000%.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, maybe there's the could be so simple to say that, a lot of doctors didn't go to medical school for business, right? And so there is some of that. So then when those administrators or when those practitioners get promoted to be administrators, they're sort of starting off, in a lot of cases, potentially business school square one, learning on the, little OJT, which is totally fine. But I think that potentially contributes to the maturity differences a little bit. Now, certainly there are absolute brilliant rock stars in healthcare that are just doing amazing things and are and there's organizations that I've seen that are much more mature than anything in financial services there. But if we want to take it on the balance of the whole, I
Mhm.
think that that's probably maybe part of the difference.
Mhm. No, that makes a lot of sense too. And remembering back even in my seems like yesterday education, being part of an executive MBA program in healthcare, there were physicians in that program too. So, yeah, they were trying to figure out the business part of healthcare.
Right.
And other leaders and nurse leaders, and they were taught clinical. They weren't taught the business aspect of it and how to read a P&L and L and how to make some decisions and strategic thinking and, and look at the system systemically, and just through a clinical lens. And always big on, things need to be even cybersecurity too, systemic. Everything's related in a system, everything's related in healthcare.
Now, I will say, Pamela, and you didn't ask, but I will say
Okay.
that even still, when it comes to risk and how we think about it in cybersecurity versus how we think about it in financial services, but the business aspect of
Yeah.
risk,
Mhm.
a lot of the definitions and like they're the same.
Mhm.
But and I've argued this in the past, and I've kinda waffled on my own argument sometimes, but I think I'm coming back to it, is that in cybersecurity there, we don't get a lot of vehicles that you get in, like, business risk evaluation as such as, like, being able to, distribute risk and, some of those other vehicles that you can leverage there
Mhm.
to kind of, negate it. The at the end state, the risk is still in the organization. And so any mitigating factors and compensating controls that you use, while they can potentially decrease the residual risk by some measure, essentially you can't really distribute the risk anywhere else. It's the buck still stops with your security leader and ultimately, honestly, the CEO. So,
Mhm. Absolutely. That's really great. And it just even points to another parallel, general parallel, where healthcare has continued to evolve as a business through the decades. From an operational standpoint, financial standpoint, not just cybersecurity, where it's really evolved. And so it just hasn't had some of the tools that other industries have had.
huh, and maybe, as you said that, and maybe that's sort of a dirty word, right? Because I think most the practitioners didn't get into it for the business aspect of it, right? They got into it because they wanted to help people, and man, I wish that that was, the prevailing sentiment that we could just do that and didn't have to worry about the ugly aspect of business, I guess, maybe, but that's not reality, so, yeah.
No, right? I remember that. So no, I think all of us, including myself, started in healthcare to help people and we stayed there.
Mhm.
But yet you've got to watch the financials. It's the bare things of even, hey, you got to have money to run the business. You got to keep the lights on. You got to be able to pay the staff. You've got,
Right.
but yeah, most of us wish we didn't have that and healthcare's complicated, as we all know. So thank you for that. No, very insightful. Now, this is a great question I love. So you started as an engineer. right? Yeah, you
Absolutely,
started back in the
absolutely.
day with an engineer, all this technical foundation. Not the typical path to go into leadership in the C-suite. I mean, it's kinda not, sometimes, but really not.
Mhm.
What was the moment you realized leadership was your path?
That's a really good question. I would say, I would be curious to
Mm,
say that I'm not so certain that, like, my path when it comes to cybersecurity is all that unique, at least for,
yeah. Mhm,
the old timers like myself, I guess, if you would wanna say. There was actually a time, when I was much less mature, that I thought that maybe the only way to and through cybersecurity was, like, my path, like, my path, the way that I came up was the only true path.
mhm,
Softened on that as I've gotten older, and I realize, being more mature, that that's not actually the case. Um, but to answer the question, really, as long as I can remember, like, as far as, being, like, professional here, I've always, like, really, trended towards leadership. Now, I will say that with the caveat that, like most, technical people, and I've been a technical person all my life, and I've always loved technical things, right?
mhm,
Um, I had to really learn how to summit the mountain that is public speaking, and I will say, my very last college course, studying for, for my bachelor's there, not like, "Oh, this is my last general education." My last course was public speaking in college there. That was the last one that I took, and, because I was, deathly afraid of, like, speaking in public.
sure.
And now, in which, I guess to back up a bit, no, my kids absolutely do not believe that. There's like, "Dad, the way you talk now, like, there's no way," right? But, by the time I actually took the course, I had, like, this crazy college job, and that actually forced me to, that particular college job, like, I had to talk with, hundreds of people at a time regularly, and so, honestly, by the time that I took my public speaking class there in a class of, like, a room of 21, that was nothing, right? And so, but yeah, that was just kinda like, just sort of a funny memory that I have, but I've always liked leading people and seeing people succeed, and so that's always really my kinda been my thing.
Mhm. That's great. Great. You kinda knew, right? Even early on. So growing and developing and leading people. And knowing you also making a difference.
That's great, absolutely, yep, thank
Mhm.
you, I appreciate that, no,
Mhm.
that's very important, I want people to succeed and
Yeah,
put their mark, and so,
yeah, it's very clear. I mean, those are great qualities of a great leader. You know,
yep,
you're invested in other people, you're invested in their success. You want to give them the tools and the guidance and the mentoring and the coaching, and great leaders want their people to succeed. So, yeah,
100%, like,
awesome.
yeah, people have poured into me, and so it's, I think at one it's kinda like that I'm a like an open source guy, right? So, like, the open source, there's kinda like this whole philosophy and technical with, like, open source, you know, you take, but you give back. So the people who pour into you, you pour into others there, and I guess maybe that's part of that,
Yeah.
part of the founding of that of myself there is a real keystone
Mhm.
ideal,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that. So, some of the listeners may be listening, right? They may not be at the level you've achieved in your career. What advice would you give someone? And I guess a way to answer or ask the question is what advice would you give your younger self? What career advice would you give your younger self that's applicable to the audience?
Ooh, that's a good one because how I wish I could tell myself, well, if I
Mhm.
only knew then, right?
Right.
So always pretty technical, really, and so what was, my own strengths, and oddly enough, maybe, uh, always really, a people person as well, and
Mhm.
so I really love to talk to people, but let me sort of, like, break that down. So, like, the way that I love to talk to people is like, "Oh, well, if you ask my opinion about something, well, how do you do this?" Like, I've always was under the impression, like, well, just like let's just logic our way through this, right? And
Mhm.
if I could, break it down for you logically, then we can follow the logic through, and boom, bing, bop, right? We're there, and that's where it is. But as I have kind of grown up the ranks there, I find that that's actually not where it is. And so, let me maybe let me explain a little bit here. So, if I could say that to keep the bottom line more upfront, there is to start developing the muscles to translate like tech speak to business risk speak.
Mhm.
Um, Sort of like the example I gave, that as well intentioned as I may have been to like my non-tech colleagues there, like even if you break this technical thing down,
Mhm.
tech, to its logical pieces there, they won't get it, right? Because they don't necessarily care about the how so much as it is the end game. And so it's really about understanding what it is they're actually truly asking. So like what's the real question? If you will indulge me, I think I've actually got a story. And this is kind of funny.
Please.
And so I don't know if I've ever told the story before, but almost every technical person
Wow.
has a story similar to this. And so there was a time that I had to explain something to someone, and it was, I was like, "Oh, this is great. I got this debt to rights. I know exactly what it is. Let me break this down for you." And I really broke it down to its essential elements of technobabble, right?
Mhm.
And then, and so this was it was a meeting there. There were several different departments and all that good stuff, as we tend to have with these meetings, right? More people than we actually need.
Mhm.
Further breaking it down. So I got it down to its crucial elements, right? So like further breaking it down would have made the explanation inaccurate, right? There was like a project manager that was there, and they're sort of half in, half out, and they were a good project manager by all accounts. But they attempted to sort of like break it down, like, oh, let me be the Montez translator, right?
Mhm.
And so then they were in their effort, they abstracted away so much of what I was saying that it just ended up being in the sphere of like flat wrong. I
Mhm.
was furious. I can just say that I sort of naively, I suppose, and maybe I held on to this for longer than I should have, but I had a notion that if you were going to ask a question about something in my world,
Mhm.
that there was a certain base level of knowledge that you had to have to understand it. Now, I would be willing to get anyone to that base level. Like, I will work with you till the cows came home to
Mhm.
get you to understand the logic behind it, but I was not going to break it down to the point of like making the abstraction like inaccurate, right? And so um I held on to that for a long time. I would say that if I could tell my younger self to break away from that, I would want to do that. And just because, and the way that I would do that is, what I didn't understand was that the question really didn't matter. It was really trying to figure out what the end goal was. And so, like, what's the end? So, like, is it, so like in this political sphere, right? Because even as a
Mhm.
young security person there, right in this meeting there's politics going about that I really didn't realize at the time too.
Sure.
And so is the question they asked, was it something that they used to like make themselves feel like technically superior to like the other not technical colleagues, right? And then they're just asking for me just to co-sign on their, that's what the kids say now, I think, right? To co-sign on their technical prowess. Is it a test? Is it a quiz to assert if I know the business process that's attached to the question potentially? Or, if the question was legitimate, what are they actually really asking? And then trying to figure that out as part of like the mission, really. And so that's the business folks are keyed in on like the mission aspect of it. And so that would be the last piece of it, would be the once
Mhm.
you have like the business risk speak.
Okay.
like translating that to like what's the mission, and then that is applicable for whatever level. It doesn't mean just at the chief level,
Sure.
executive level. That if you are an operator and you're in the meeting there, like what's the mission at your level, and just to understand that you in security would be very far along if you understood that, I think.
Mhm. That's great. And again, I think the take two is having the end goal, getting everybody to understand what the end goal is,
Yep.
breaking through communication gaps, understanding gaps,
Mhm.
different disciplines, and just focus on that end
Mhm.
goal and filter out the noise. Because sometimes in meetings with a lot of different, it's challenging when you're in a room working with the board, right? Communication can
Mhm.
be challenging because you're dealing with people with different backgrounds,
Yep.
different lenses, different lanes, whether they come from finance, whether they
Mhm.
come from ops or clinical, and then how do you get that communication piece and everybody there? And really, you just kind of answered it. It's just the focus, getting people to focus on what are we doing? Get the politics out of the way, get the agendas out of the way. What's the goal, and how do we work together to move towards that?
I think you're right, and I think everyone assumes that everyone is on the same page, and
Mm.
I think there are a lot of people, most human nature, that
Mhm.
no one's gonna speak up and say, "I don't understand what's going on."
Oh yeah, right.
I
You
think
can raise
that's
your hand in the class. Oh no, I can't. I know you know what they're talking about. I can't raise my hand.
that.
You don't, and that goes to the other thing I love what you said, just for people in general, is a lot of times somebody says something, they have a question, but what are they truly asking you? What is their true agenda? What's their true issue?
Mhm.
A lot of times, it's not coming out, and you need to ask further questions, and they may not even know themselves.
Right. Yep.
So just
And
having those great communication skills with one-on-one, with groups, with people, making sure everybody, like you said, you're focused. So thank
yeah,
you. We went off tangent a little bit, but
right. A little bit, but I
yeah.
think it was a good one. I think it was a good tangent.
Just it's people, right? It's
That's right.
communication and people and getting everybody just to make sure everything is working and
That's
safe.
right.
Data is safe. People are safe. Any industry, but in healthcare, you're dealing with people's lives that you've been entrusted to. Whether you're a hospital, nursing home health care, whoever, you're dealing with people's lives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%.
So, um, when you're leading people and hiring leaders, let's say on a team, right? When you're leading some people, hiring leaders in your space, in the technology, cybersecurity space, what are some non negotiables for you to hire? And what are some red flags for you in your space?
Oh, man. Let's see. Non-negotiables. So I like to put together, like, very thoughtful about the program.
Hmm.
And of course, the leaders have to be, on board with the program, understanding that and executing doesn't mean robots. Don't want robots, but it's, can they speak to the overall mission? Do they know who they're talking to? So like in the healthcare setting, right? So let's say we, a group of physician officers there, you have like a clinic director or something like that.
Hmm.
Can they translate what we're doing to them in the way that they understand? Because they want to understand it and they want to do the right thing, but we make it difficult for them to do so if we talk over their head. Um, another one would be like, I forget who this was, and it's not mine, but whoever came up with this, from my past life, I apologize, I forgot who you were, but extreme ownership, right? And it's just, accountability, right? So, my leaders, I need to have the ability to know that I can turn over a part of the program or turn over a process or groups of processes to them, and I know that they will own the outcome, right? They need to adapt it to their own personal way of whatever. That's cool, but
Mhm.
as long as they own the outcome.
Yeah.
Um, and then lastly, I would suppose would be more or less like empathetic security, which I guess is sort of like a culture piece as well. But it's just we all know about the we just can't say no all the time. And we have to understand like because if we have to understand the fact that when we say no, that pushes the business underground and it bypasses technology and it bypasses security. So how do we take that wild request and make it into something where we can say yes safely? Because I have this thing where it's like if Montez says no to something, which I try not to do very often. If
Mhm.
I say no, then that's a real like, oh, hold on, like, like push the button for emergency stop because that's Montez never says no. So if he says no to this, that must mean it's something absolutely serious. And so you people can get nose blind or whatever to like if the security people say no all the time, that's all they say. Now there is another piece of that that maybe we'll sort of get into later, but I think those are the three. Something that sort of like falls apart in reality, I think.
Mhm.
Um, like a red flag. Oh man, in my industry, we call them paper tigers. I don't know if that converts to healthcare at large there, but it's sometimes they call them like the checkbox champion or something like that. But it's like somebody who's like an incredible pedigree on paper, right? But then, you get into talking with them and then basically, it's all sizzle and no steak. I got that from my brother-in-law. Yeah, that's actually a hidden maxim there. But, maybe it looks like so someone on paper, right? They say that they've led multiple, high trust R2 full compliance initiatives that,
Mhm.
they always get like raw scores of 100 with a maturity of like 5 plus. Like, okay,
Right.
okay, that looks great on paper, but like, is that really the reality there? Right? It's
Mhm.
incon, like Princess Diaries is one of my favorite movies there. So inconceivable, right? Inconceivable for for that to actually be a true statement. So
Well, and it's interesting, not only that, so I love the sizzle and no steak. I love that.
yeah.
Great way, check the box, different things. But here's what's even going on right now with resumes and people is again, pro and cons with AI. We're going to talk about AI too. But did you know at this point there's a variety of different references that resumes, I think it's 64% have been completed by AI for job applicants?
Oh wow. Yeah, that's um
Uh-huh. And
that
then
I believe that because I'd imagine that yeah, especially overall, they have a good portion of resumes that start ever so slightly probably looking the same, right?
yeah, well, that's the problem, right? And then the other problem too is they're now showing there's some data points a little early, but different organizations are showing do some research on this and compute some of the facts, but they're not correct. The data isn't correct. The background isn't correct on the
Oof.
so something to talk about on AI. So the good,
Yeah.
the pro, and the cons with AI.
Yeah, I mean, it's great, but for something like that, that's sort of creative, but yeah,
Mhm.
man, it's a
Yeah, that would be check the box, but the box
it's a
isn't
box,
correct.
right? Yeah, have to
You
be
know, so
careful.
you've got check the box when it's exact over here, and you've got check the box when it really isn't check the box
Right.
today. So you do really need to be careful and validate that. So, well, speaking about AI, I mean, it is advancing so much. It's rapidly inside healthcare organizations, it's in different areas, it's in recruiting, it's everywhere. And so the threats that come with AI, there's big threats that come with AI.
Mhm.
What keeps you up at night right now, and what are you actively doing about it as it relates to AI?
Well, one, I think it's wonderful. The ability that it gives us to be more effective and efficient is fantastic. I think it's caught us in the security landscape practitioners a little flat-footed. Maybe it shouldn't have, but it has
Mhm.
for by in all practical purposes there.
Yeah.
What it does, if we and I'll get to the answer, but what it does is that it creates like citizen developers or mini CIOs, and that's a paradigm that we haven't really had to worry about in large scale before. There's always been like, shadow IT and that and sort of like hammering that down, but this really exacerbates it and it really comes down to the data and how that flows and where it's at.
Mhm.
I hate to say it, that's one aspect that we in security were just, on the information security side,
Mhm.
that is our charge, right? Is to protect the data no matter where it is. And we don't often know where the data is 100%. And so that, a lot of that is what I do about it is, understanding, okay, trying to figure out, okay, those data points of where the data actually is.
Mhm.
And then the other piece of that is sort of the boring part of it is the identity stuff. And so it's understanding that the the humans, the non-humans, and then there's even a third one that we call even like the agents. Now the agents are non-humans, but
Mhm.
fundamentally speaking, there we actually kind of put them in a third bucket be, because of the way they can act very human-like and some as opposed to like a rote deterministic like a computer process. And so, really getting an understanding and a handle on that, there is, orders of magnitude more identities that are going to be non-human and orders of magnitude more of than that will be more of the agentic style than there actually will be in the human. And so just that those are the two sort of ends of it that we really need to get a good handle on. And so there's a lot of help out there right now that's starting to get there, but again, I think we're a little behind the curve.
Yeah, thank you for that. I wanna fit this in. We used to talk about cybersecurity as a data privacy issue, but now we have ransomwares averting ambulances
Mhm.
and delaying surgeries. How should hospital CEOs shift their mindset to truly see cyber risk as patient safety today?
This isn't going to be a popular answer, probably with anyone. But
Okay.
the here we go. How about this? So if we need to paint a room,
Mhm,
and you go through all these processes there, though, they're picking who we're going to get the paint from and all this and that, and
mhm,
boom, and then
mhm,
you're like, oh,
mhm,
we're down to two colors, and you've got your paint buckets in hand. You go to the room like, hey, Montez, the security guy, is it okay if I paint the room this color or this color? And then I say, well, the bucket in your left hand is against best practice, and the bucket in your right hand is illegal. Then security then gets labeled as a blocker, right? When in essence, security should when were thinking about painting the room is when security should have been invited to the conversation. All too often, I think that security is invited too late. A lot of it's our own doing because of the fact that we talked about earlier, because of us not understanding how to the political game and like, just working our way into the room early, right? So a lot of it's our own do,
mhm,
but for our CEOs there and that, so for them to really be, taking like the cyber risk, you know, from a patient safety perspective seriously, is
mhm,
that they probably need to have more conversations, more reps, right? More reps, more conversations with their security leader. And a lot of times in security, we feel like, as a CISO, right? A CISO, that we feel like the C is a small c, not a capital C. And so there's a change that needs to happen, and needs to be a lot of effort on both sides to capitalize that C, so that the CEO and the CISO feel together there. There is something that there's one of those quotes that a good security program is like 6.5% of the budget of IT or something like that, and that's such an old thought. And there is much, that is if you're just talking about security from like a firewall, like firewalls and network basic stuff like that. It's, if you are, even a mid-size, a mid-market, like digital organization with like a digital transformation, like that, it should be, closer to like 18%. If you are, but I would argue that even security as a percentage of IT is the wrong thinking, because that's not business strategy there. That's just a percentage of technology there. So as a technology, sunk cost essentially there,
Mhm.
probably, I don't know how accurate this is. I did see that potentially like 0.5% to 1% of like revenue at risk is a maybe potential better metric. I don't know. Like that one, I think I need to kind of like
I
figure it out a little bit. But
Mhm.
to finish up the answer, it's the CISO should be interfacing with the CEO, rest of the C-suite, EVPs on a regular basis. Like, and then probably we need to have like a lieutenant or a right hand person that is really like a deputy CISO that's doing a lot of the day-to-day operations there. I think there's more of that networking and things like that that needs to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it really just comes down to involvement early
Yep,
and communication and management,
yep, absolutely,
and then accountability from all the leaders together.
100%. Yeah, yeah. There is. Here's maybe a good. I know we're running up on time, but there is a potential there. Like it's if your doctor is say, hey,
Mhm,
Montez, maybe you don't need 3 honey buns a day, and maybe you don't need this, all these bad things, some monster Red Bulls or whatever.
mhm,
And then I go back later, it's like, oh man, my A1C is like through the roof. And
mhm.
it's like, should I be mad at the doctor for that, right? Because that can't be right. That's silly, right? And so there is only so much that a CISO and the security department can really do. They are helping to moderate risk on behalf of the organization. But even still, I think that's an old thought. I think that we should integrate them as such that they feel like, okay, my job is ensuring clinical patient outcomes. When we can say that that's the way they feel, then you know that you have a mature cyber organization in your organization.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. I know we're getting close to wrapping up here because of time. Is there anything else you think a leader or a listener would benefit from knowing?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, cybersecurity is the breadth of it is much wider than I think a lot of not technical people understand. If they were to say, okay, well, what does cybersecurity do? It'll be a very small fraction of what the actual job is. And I think you can kind of sort of equivocate it to being like they would think that the CISO essentially is the cyber compliance officer for IT. And while yeah, that's true that they sort of do have that role, it's so much more than that. And in a lot of ways, the breadth of information security, cybersecurity as an umbrella term can be wider than the technology teams, because not nearly as deep, right? Technology goes pretty deep on some stuff, but when it comes to breadth, yeah, it's the cross cuts every part of the organization, and if they have operational technology, even more so. So
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I just want to say this has been so educational. This is just thoughtful conversation, Montez. Thank you for pulling back the curtain. for all the listeners on what it really takes to protect patients, data, people, in a system moving so quickly today. I mean, just the rapid changes we have today. To our listeners, if today's conversation made you think differently about cybersecurity, leadership, or both, that's exactly what we're here to do. This is Pamela Baer. This is Healthcare Leaders Reshaping Healthcare. And we'll see you on the next session. Again, thank you so much.